In Seattle and across King County, the impact of the fentanyl crisis has become impossible to ignore. In 2023, the county recorded more than 1,000 fentanyl-related deaths, a staggering 47% increase in just 1 year. These aren't just statistics, they represent neighbors, co-workers, and family members suddenly gone. According to the CDC, over 107,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in 2022, and 68% of those deaths were tied to synthetic opioids like fentanyl. What makes fentanyl so deadly is its sheer potency. It is 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. Just 2 milligrams, an amount small enough to fit on the tip of a pencil, can be fatal. This is why a single counterfeit pill can take a life in an instant. Even more alarming, fentanyl is no longer limited to heavy users. It is being mixed into methamphetamine, cocaine, and counterfeit Xanax or oxycodone tablets. Many victims never even knew they were taking it. That means high school students, college kids, and young professionals experimenting at a party are at the same risk as longtime addicts. The question is chilling. How do you fight a drug that can kill with a single mistake? The trail of poison flooding Seattle does not begin in Washington state. It starts thousands of miles away in Sinaloa, Mexico, where cartel chemists operate massive pill press labs. These labs churn out hundreds of thousands of counterfeit tablets every single day designed to look like oxycodone, Percocet, or Xanax. But hidden inside is the same deadly ingredient, fentanyl. From there, the product is moved north through a network of smuggling routes. Cartel operatives hide shipments in tractor-trailers, freight trains, and cleverly engineered vehicle compartments built to slip past border inspections. Once across the border, the drugs are routed into distribution hubs across the United States, with the Pacific Northwest becoming a prime target. Inside Seattle, local associates and street gangs take over. They move the pills through nightclubs, suburban neighborhoods, and even school communities, pushing the product as if it were legitimate prescription medicine. The supply is so abundant that the street price has collapsed from $1.65 per pill in 2021 to just 45 cents in 2024. The scale of this pipeline reveals the truth: this isn't casual smuggling. It's a full-scale distribution empire built to saturate American cities with death disguised as medicine. By the summer of 2025, federal officials realized that traditional tactics were no longer enough. The Sinaloa Cartel wasn't just moving product into Seattle, it was embedding itself inside the community building, a distribution empire hidden in plain sight. To strike back, authorities launched a campaign unlike anything the region had ever seen. They called it Operation Hydra, symbolizing a many-headed monster that had to be cut down all at once. The operation brought together more than 600 personnel from ICE, the DEA, the FBI, the Seattle Police Department, and the King County Sheriff's Office. Over the course of just 5 days, from August 25 to August 29, 2025, agents executed 31 search warrants across Seattle and its surrounding areas. The coordination was unprecedented. For years, cartels had exploited gaps between local, state, and federal agencies. But this time, everyone moved as one. ICE brought immigration intelligence. The DEA tracked drug routes. The FBI mapped financial flows, and local police provided ground-level knowledge of gangs and stash houses. Raids were launched simultaneously at stash houses, transportation hubs, and money laundering fronts, preventing suspects from warning each other or moving the product. The result was staggering: a cartel pipeline dismantled, safe houses exposed, and millions of lethal doses taken off the streets in a single week. Operation Hydra proved one thing: when U.S. law enforcement stands united, even the most entrenched cartel networks can be shattered. What agents pulled out of Seattle's stash houses looked less like evidence from a drug bust and more like the spoils of war. The most shocking discovery was 480 kilograms of fentanyl powder, alongside more than 715,000 counterfeit pills. Combined, that represented over 6.9 million lethal doses, enough to kill the entire population of the Seattle-Tacoma metro area several times over. But the seizures didn't stop with drugs. Agents uncovered a cache of more than 20 firearms, including assault rifles, handguns, modified with illegal Glock switches, that turned them into fully automatic weapons, and stockpiles of armor-piercing ammunition. Even more disturbing were the live grenades, evidence that cartel operatives in the U.S. were arming themselves with battlefield weapons. The money trail was equally staggering. Nearly $13 million in cash and assets was confiscated, bundles of bills hidden in closets, stashed inside vehicles, and packed into false compartments. Alongside the cash were luxury items and vehicles, the most striking being a Dodge TRX Mammoth truck worth over $150,000. To cartel bosses, this was more than just a ride. It was a rolling symbol of wealth and power, meant to remind everyone that drug money could buy anything, even loyalty. Together, the drugs, weapons, and cash painted a terrifying picture. The Sinaloa Cartel had transformed parts of Seattle into a militarized outpost of its empire. Behind the piles of drugs, weapons, and cash were the people who kept the Seattle operation alive. At the very top were two brothers from Sinaloa, Mexico, Rosario, Abel Camargo Bañuelos, age 31, and Francisco Fernando Camargo Bañuelos, age 24. Federal indictments identified them as the ringleaders, orchestrating shipments from Mexico while directing their network of U.S.-based associates. On the ground in Washington state, agents discovered a web of trusted operatives. Aaron Knapp, 52, from Everett, turned his suburban home into a stash site where agents found over 2 kilograms of fentanyl pills and equipment for further distribution. Just a few miles away, John Hardman, 57, also of Everett, had fentanyl powder marked with a swastika symbol and nearly $250,000 in cash hidden in his home. Investigators believe the markings were a way to brand shipments, much like consumer products. Other key players were foreign nationals who had re-entered the U.S. illegally. Jose Felix German, a 34-year-old Mexican national, acted as a courier transporting money and assets for the group. Despite being deported in 2013, he returned and embedded himself once again in the cartel's U.S. arm. Another figure, Isabel Voral-Zapian, 44, worked as a truck driver moving large loads of fentanyl across state lines. Together, these individuals showed how the Sinaloa Cartel blurred national borders, blending Mexican leadership with American recruits to create a resilient hybrid network operating deep inside Seattle's suburbs. In February 2025, the U.S. government took an unprecedented step. It officially designated the Sinaloa Cartel as a foreign terrorist organization, FTO, under a new Executive Order 157, signed by then-President Donald Trump. For decades, cartels had been treated as criminal enterprises, but the devastation caused by fentanyl forced Washington to redraw the lines. No longer would cartel leaders be seen merely as traffickers. They would now be prosecuted as terrorists waging war on American soil. This legal shift gave agencies like ICE, DEA, and the FBI extraordinary powers. Under the new framework, prosecutors could pursue anyone providing material support to the cartel, even indirectly. Bank accounts linked to suspected operatives could be frozen without lengthy trials. Wiretaps and surveillance measures once reserved for hunting Al-Qaeda or ISIS could now be used against cartel cells in Seattle. Even low-level associates face the risk of being charged as terrorism financiers instead of ordinary criminals. The consequences were immediate. Several defendants indicted during Operation Hydra were not only charged with drug trafficking, but also with providing support to a terrorist organization. That elevated their cases from local courtrooms to national security prosecutions, carrying the possibility of life sentences. For the Camargo Bañuelos brothers, the stakes skyrocketed. They were no longer fugitives in a drug case, but terror leaders in the eyes of the U.S. government. Politically, the decision sent ripples far beyond Seattle. Foreign governments were now forced to choose: cooperate with America's counterterrorism campaign against cartels or risk sanctions. In Mexico, officials worried about U.S. operations spilling across the border. Yet they quietly acknowledged the fentanyl epidemic had spiraled out of control. The message was clear: by labeling the Sinaloa Cartel a terrorist group, Washington stripped away the glamour of narco-culture and replaced it with the stigma of terrorism. This rebranding wasn't just symbolic. It armed prosecutors with stronger tools, harsher penalties, and broader international reach. In the battle against fentanyl, it marked a turning point, one where America vowed to treat cartel networks not just as criminals but as existential threats to national security. The battle against the Sinaloa Cartel is not only about drugs and money, it is also about technology and firepower. Intelligence reports reveal that the cartel has escalated far beyond the days of hidden shipments and street dealers. In Mexico, they have already deployed drones capable of dropping improvised bombs, built IEDs similar to those used in overseas war zones, and even fired rocket-propelled grenades RPGs during clashes with rivals and security forces. U.S. officials fear it is only a matter of time before these tactics spill across the border into cities like Seattle. Smuggling techniques have also reached a new level of sophistication. Cartel engineers are designing carbon-lined aluminum packages meant to evade X-ray scanners at border checkpoints. Others have begun masking fentanyl shipments with chlorine-scented liquids, confusing drug-sniffing dogs and overwhelming inspectors. Every time law enforcement develops new detection technology, the cartel responds with an equally innovative countermeasure. It has become a dangerous cat-and-mouse game, one where the cost of failure is measured in American lives. The economics of the drug trade add to the urgency. In 2021, a single counterfeit fentanyl pill sold for about $1.65 on the street. By 2024, the price had collapsed to 45 cents. To some, lower prices might sound like good news, but to investigators it signals catastrophic oversupply. The cartel is flooding the market with such volume that fentanyl is now cheaper and more accessible than ever. For teenagers, college students, and working families, that means the barrier to trying a deadly pill has all but disappeared. Agents on the ground describe the cartel as acting more like a paramilitary force than a criminal gang. With stockpiles of armor-piercing rounds, automatic rifles, and grenades, their safe houses look like forward operating bases. The truth is sobering. The Sinaloa Cartel has evolved into a hybrid organization, part drug empire, part military machine, and it is determined to stay one step ahead of American law enforcement. The aftermath of Operation Hydra brought a wave of relief to Seattle, but it also exposed the terrifying depth of the crisis. For many residents, the headline's 6.9 million lethal doses, seized grenades, and rifles confiscated, and millions in cash taken were almost too shocking to believe. Yet, for families who had already lost loved ones to fentanyl overdoses, the raid confirmed what they had long suspected. The cartel wasn't just knocking at the door, it was already inside their neighborhoods. In King County, where more than 1,000 fentanyl-related deaths were recorded in 2023, nearly every family has felt the impact in some way. Teachers speak of students who never returned after a weekend party. Employers quietly grieve over young workers who collapsed at home. Parents keep Narcan in their kitchens the way they once kept aspirin. The reality is stark. Seattle's fentanyl problem is not confined to addicts on the street. It cuts across every class, every age group, every community. First responders are living with this nightmare daily. Paramedics describe scenes where multiple people overdose at the same time because a single batch of counterfeit pills was shared among friends. Doctors admit that fentanyl is now present in almost every toxicology screen they run. Police officers, many already burned out from years of responding to crisis calls, now carry naloxone spray as a part of their standard gear. One deputy put it bluntly, "We don't just chase criminals anymore. Half the time, we're trying to keep the community alive long enough for treatment." The pressure on public health infrastructure is enormous. Hospitals in Seattle and Tacoma are overwhelmed with overdose cases stretching emergency rooms beyond their limits. Social workers struggle to find beds in treatment centers, and many admit the waiting lists are weeks long, far too long for someone whose life could end in minutes. Meanwhile, community organizations scramble to educate teens and parents, holding assemblies and workshops about the dangers of pills that look legitimate but can kill with a single dose. Perhaps most chilling is the way fentanyl has reshaped community psychology. In some suburban neighborhoods, parents warn their kids not just about drugs, but about candy, fearing that a pill disguised as a sweet could end up in a child's hand. High schools have installed new awareness programs. College campuses in the Pacific Northwest now stock naloxone kits in the dormitories. Even nightclubs have staff trained to respond to overdoses. This constant state of vigilance has created what many describe as a climate of fear, where every pill, every party, and every unknown powder is seen as a potential death sentence. And yet amid the devastation, Operation Hydra gave the community a rare moment of hope. The image of agents stacking up seized pills and confiscated rifles was a powerful reminder that law enforcement is fighting back. Families who lost children or siblings to fentanyl overdose spoke publicly about their gratitude, saying that perhaps thousands of other parents would be spared their grief. Community leaders rallied behind the operation, calling it proof that federal, state, and local agencies working together can deliver results. Still, the shadow of the cartel lingers. Residents ask the haunting question, if the cartel built this kind of empire in Seattle, where else is it already embedded? The sense of vulnerability runs deep. Even after the bust, fentanyl remains cheap and widely available. The raids may have slowed the flow, but they did not stop it. New dealers are ready to fill the void. New shipments are already on the way, and the cycle threatens to repeat itself. For many in Seattle, the fallout is a paradox relief that millions of lethal doses are off the streets, but dread that tomorrow's headlines may bring news of another wave. The community fallout is not just measured in statistics, but in the emotional toll, the fear in a mother's eyes, the exhaustion in a paramedic's voice, the empty seat at a classroom desk. It is the haunting reminder that the fentanyl crisis is not a distant war. It is here, it is now, and it is reshaping American life one overdose at a time. The takedown in Seattle made headlines across the United States, but experts were quick to stress an uncomfortable truth: this was not an isolated case. The Sinaloa Cartel has long operated like a multinational corporation with built-in redundancies and the ability to adapt to any disruption. What Operation Hydra proved is that the cartel had successfully embedded itself inside a major American city, but it also raised a chilling question. How many other cities are already compromised? Law enforcement officials say the Seattle bust was just one visible piece of a much larger network. Intelligence points to active cartel pipelines in Phoenix, Denver, Portland, Chicago, and along major highways that run through the Midwest. Each of these hubs functions as a regional distribution point, feeding fentanyl and other synthetic opioids into surrounding states. Just as Seattle became a staging ground for the Pacific Northwest, other cities are quietly serving as nodes in a nationwide web of trafficking. The danger lies in the cartel's resilience. If one route is shut down, another is activated almost instantly. If one courier is arrested, a replacement steps in within days. The Sinaloa Cartel doesn't rely on a single network, it operates dozens simultaneously. Federal officials compare it to fighting a hydra, cut off one head and two more appear. That was the very inspiration behind the name of the Seattle operation. The national implications of this crisis are staggering. In 2022, the CDC reported more than 107,000 overdose deaths nationwide, with 68% linked to synthetic opioids like fentanyl. That means nearly 73,000 American lives were lost in just 1 year to a drug measured in milligrams. By 2023, local reports from places like King County showed year-over-year increases of nearly 50% in fentanyl-related deaths. Multiply that across 50 states, and the numbers reveal a public health emergency of historic proportions. Communities from West Virginia to California, from New Mexico to New Hampshire, now report fentanyl in nearly every toxicology screen following an overdose. Unlike earlier drug epidemics that were often regional, fentanyl is everywhere at once. Rural towns, suburban neighborhoods, and urban centers all find themselves battling the same invisible enemy. A teenager experimenting at a party in Ohio faces the same deadly risks as a construction worker in Texas or a college student in Seattle. The price collapse of counterfeit pills makes the situation worse. A pill that once sold for $1.65 now costs 45 cents on the street. For young users, that makes fentanyl more accessible than alcohol or marijuana. As one DEA agent warned, "When poison is cheaper than candy, you're looking at a generation at risk." Beyond the overdose statistics, there are national security concerns. The cartel's use of grenades, armor-piercing rounds, and drones signals an evolution toward militarized tactics. U.S. intelligence officials fear that if pressure intensifies, cartels could escalate violence north of the border, targeting law enforcement directly. Already, U.S. agents have recovered explosives and battlefield weapons inside American stash houses. The idea that cartels are preparing for open confrontation inside U.S. cities is no longer dismissed as far-fetched, it is now a working scenario. The terrorist designation of the Sinaloa Cartel reflects this shift. By treating cartel operatives as terrorists rather than drug traffickers, the U.S. government has expanded its toolkit. But it also reframes the narrative the fentanyl crisis is no longer just a criminal matter, it is a war against an enemy force using chemical weapons on the American population. Some prosecutors have even compared fentanyl to a weapon of mass destruction, capable of killing millions if left unchecked. For families across the country, these warnings feel painfully real. Parents now talk about the risk of fentanyl contamination with the same urgency once reserved for school shootings or natural disasters. In some households, Narcan kits sit next to first aid boxes. High schools in states like Oregon, Colorado, and Ohio are running fentanyl awareness campaigns showing students how a pill the size of a Tic Tac can end a life. The sense of fear once centered in hotspots like Seattle is spreading nationwide. Yet experts caution against complacency. While Operation Hydra was a victory, the Sinaloa Cartel is far from defeated. Every day, new shipments move across the southern border. Every week, new dealers pop up in communities across America. Every month, new overdose victims are added to a growing list of names. The fight is ongoing, and it will demand more than just raids and arrests. The warning is clear. Seattle was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. The cartel has already proven it can adapt, infiltrate, and rebuild. The real question is whether America can stay one step ahead. Without aggressive enforcement, community prevention, and international cooperation, the fentanyl epidemic will continue to claim tens of thousands of lives each year. In the words of one veteran DEA agent, Seattle was a win. But the war is just starting. And if we think this was big, wait until we see what's coming next. The story of Operation Hydra is more than a headline about a drug bust. It is a wake-up call for America. In just 1 week, agents seized 6.9 million lethal doses of fentanyl, over $13 million in cash and assets, and an arsenal of grenades, rifles, and Glock-converted handguns. Those numbers aren't just evidence. They are proof of how deeply the Sinaloa Cartel had embedded itself inside Seattle. For a brief moment, families could breathe easier, knowing that millions of deadly pills would never make it into their homes, schools, or neighborhoods. But even as communities felt relief, the question loomed: how long until the next wave arrives? Cartels operate like machines, constantly adapting, constantly replacing what is lost. And while law enforcement delivered a crushing blow, no one inside the agencies is pretending that the fight is finished. The national picture is sobering. Fentanyl is now the leading cause of overdose deaths in the United States, claiming more than 70,000 American lives every year. The crisis reaches from rural towns in Ohio to urban centers in California. It spares no community. It respects no borders. It thrives wherever demand exists, and that demand shows no sign of slowing down. That is why vigilance matters. Families need to talk openly about the risks. Schools must keep up education programs. Communities must stay alert, and policymakers must keep pressure on both traffickers and their financial networks. Every pill seized, every gun taken, and every trafficker arrested buys time for families, for neighborhoods, and for the nation to respond. Seattle's Hydra operation was a victory, but it was also a warning. The war against fentanyl is far from over, and as Americans, we cannot afford to look away. If you found this breakdown eye-opening hit, subscribe now and turn on notifications. This channel will continue to track the battles against ICE, DEA, FBI, and cartel networks across America. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and remember, awareness saves lives.